We are deep into the season now, and with the cancellations of the Kasteelcross Zonnebeker and the Hondsrugcross in Gasselte, both on the 15th of January, the only cross this weekend is the World Cup in Flammanville, the second French round of the World Cup this year and a debut for this course on the French coast. Once again, it's a bit of a minefield as to who's actually going to turn up. Mathieu van der Poel is injured, of course. Wout van Aert's season has come to an end. Tom Pidcock's on a training camp. Lars van der Haar is choosing to skip this race as well in order to throw everything at the Worlds. Marianne Vos was an already known absence on the women's side. You can add Lucinda Brandt, Shirin van Anrooy, Jara Kastelein, Cele Del Calman Alvarado and Annemarie Worst to that list of absentees too. And that's just the Dutch. Honsing and Rochette have gone back to America to train for the Worlds. It's going to be quite barren. In my opinion, this is somewhat farcical. This new World Cup is supposed to promote the sport to new places, but this season as usual the American races were completely disrespected by anyone who isn't American or Elie Iserbyt. Half the peloton skipped the races in Besançon and Val d'Isole, and now Flamanville is getting treated even worse than all the ones before. The only non-Benelux race that hasn't been treated as a total joke is Tabor, and that's presumably because Tabor is historically just as much a big race as the Belgian races. The World Cup is supposed to be this super prestigious, important competition that everyone gets super excited about, but let's be honest, it isn't. And I want to understand why, because without an enticing, exciting competition, how do you expect the sport to grow? How are new fans supposed to be excited for a sport and a competition where only half the competitors can even be asked to show up to half the races? So today I thought I'd make some absolutely blistering hot takes about how, in my opinion, the sport could best grow to a larger audience. If you're old school or Belgian, you might want to skip this one. In essence, the biggest issue Cross faces, in my opinion, is the somewhat lopsided sense of hierarchy. To explain this, I'm going to take a slight detour. We're going to go from 2 wheels to 4. Formula 1 is without a doubt the biggest motorsport competition in the world, not just within its class of open wheel racing or even Grand Prix racing in general, but pretty much within any form of car racing. The driver who wins the Formula 1 World Championship is the best racing driver in the world. F1 is the pinnacle of car racing, and this hasn't just come by accident. See, Formula 1 isn't the name of the competition. Formula 1 is the name of the class of racing cars, the fastest open wheel cars on the planet. In the same way cross races fall into certain classes. You have your Coupe du Monde, and then you have your C1s and your C2s, different levels. The actual racing competition is the Drivers' World Championship, and was formed in 1950, a few years after the creation of the class Formula 1. Now I want to mainly look at the last 2 words in this name, World Championship. The winner of the Drivers' World Championship, and by definition the F1 champion, is the best racing driver in the world. In cyclocross, we have 3 separate competitions, the Trophée, the Super Prestige and the World Cup. Whilst the World Cup is technically bigger than the other 2, in reality, especially within the historic heartland of Belgium, the other competitions still hold almost as much value. This creates a weird sense of hierarchy where the winner of the World Cup isn't necessarily the best crosser in the world, because there are these other competitions too that get given just as much preference. The existence of these competitions systematically devalues the results of the other competitions, because they're all vying for the same spot. They all want to show who the best crosser in the world is. But the biggest issue in this hierarchic standing, by far, is the World Championships. Each discipline of cycling has a World Championship. The winner wears the rainbow jersey, etc. We know how that works. And within disciplines such as the road, where the courses and styles of racing are so incredibly diverse, this makes sense. But in cross, it really does just mean that the rest of the season, the other competitions, aren't actually that inherently valuable. What does the World Cup winner actually win? There's some prize money, especially on the women's side. I'm led to believe this prize money isn't even that bad comparatively. But what does the World Cup trophy look like? Is there even a trophy? What title do you gain? Essentially all you get is a short little congratulations. Last year's World Cup winners were Wout van Aert and Lucinda Brandt. I can just about remember that. But who won it before them? Not a clue. I can't imagine anybody really remembers because no one places any intrinsic value on them. Ailey Iserbyt, for example, won the World Cup overall in Hulst. The celebration amassed him pointing to his jersey and the commentators going, "Well done," and that was it. I've barely heard a mention of it since that wasn't used to mock him for failing to finish the Belgian Championships. The World Cup winner is supposed to be the most consistent and therefore best all-round crosser in the world over the course of the season, but you cannot call them that, or you cannot call them the world champion, because the rainbow bands are the factor that decides whether somebody is a world champion or not. The season and the competitions are essentially moot points as far as deciding who the best crosser is concerned. So how do we change that? The most important factor in gaining value with anything is time. The older something is and the more history it has, the more inherently valuable it becomes. This goes for everyday stuff ranging from classic cars to Lego, but also goes for sporting competitions. The F1 Championship is more prestigious now, or maybe, well, not right now, but is generally more prestigious in the modern day than it was in its inception in the 50s. Look no further than the difference between the perception of the World Cup in the older cross countries and the new ones, like the Americas. A lot of the Dutch and Belgian riders seem to place fairly equal value on winning the Super Prestige or the World Cup. If anything, the determining factor is often the circuit itself. For example, winning in Gavere is more important than winning in Rukven. Meanwhile, the impression I get from a lot of the Americans tends to be that the World Cup holds more value. This is likely because the World Cup is far easier to access, has more presence with actual races in the USA, and likely also because the USA doesn't have the same connection to the historical worth of the older races and competitions. Where, for example, veteran Belgian commentator Michel Wuits tends to hype up the Super Prestige a lot due to presumably his own love for the cross's history. It is, of course, the oldest competition after all. In the US, that's not a relevant detail. There, the competitions are historically equally relevant, predating American influence at the top end of the sport and ease of viewership for most North American people. All the competitions existed before viewership really became a thing. As a result, you sit in a situation now where it feels like the World Cup is more valued in America, comparatively, than it is in Belgium. So time is a big factor, and the longer we have an important competition, the more history it has, the more important winning it actually becomes. But there's a lot more to it too. Another thing that adds value to a competition is the prize. The World Championships are the most important race of the season, precisely because you come out of it as World Champion. That title and the rainbow bands are more important than any other race or tournament in the season. So when it takes so blisteringly hot, not even the guy from Hot Ones could manage it, we should scrap the World Championships. If the World Cup is supposed to decide the best crosser in the world, why do we have an arbitrary random day after the World Cup's finished that decides the World Championship? It doesn't make any sense. Imagine if the winner of the World Cup received the rainbow jersey. Due to the need for consistency, you can guarantee that the actual outcome would be far fairer as to who the actual best racer is. Sven Nys, for example, had a habit of dominating seasons only to somehow lose out on the world title year after year. The value of the World Cup would suddenly become immense because the biggest prize in cross is now attached to it. If you win the World Cup, you are unequivocally, factually the greatest crosser in the world. To quote the old Red Bull team,
"Du bist Weltmeister!"
Also, this might pressure the UCI into finally making an actual under-23 women's category and have them take junior racing seriously, which I think we'd all quite enjoy as well. Now, I'm well aware of the hitches in this plan. The World Championship venue is already announced up to 2026. The Worlds are usually the most watched race of the year and generally a huge money maker for everyone involved in cross. This is the kind of suggestion that, if implemented, has the possibility of obliterating the sport. I know. And I don't think it would be a good idea to facilitate this change right this second. But in the future, if you want cross to become somewhat easy to access, you might have to make this decision. Another thing that's always irked me is the way that the Cyclocross World Cup is an awful name. It doesn't flow at all, it feels awkward, and whenever anyone says World Cup, the first thing that comes to mind sure isn't Jingle Cross or Hoge Heide. Meanwhile, the Super Prestige is a brilliant name. It's, as far as I'm aware, completely unique. It sounds pretty bloody awesome. Imagine being the Super Prestige World Champion. That's an epic title. The Super Prestige in of itself has some pretty classic races that belong to it. Places like Diegem and Gavere belong amongst the biggest competitions. Personally, I wouldn't be against seeing a merger between the World Cup and the Super Prestige. The UCI Cyclocross Super Prestige World Championship sounds like quite the competition, doesn't it? As for the races, I'd venture towards taking the 4 better courses, in my opinion, Gieten, Zolder, Diegem, Gavere, and placing them within this new World Championship, alongside whatever courses are already in it, due to surviving from the World Cup, etc. The other 4 races, which are Ruddervoort and Niel, and especially Max-Plas and Boom, aren't the most inspired courses. They'd be better suited to an X2O Trophy or the ATS course. Once again, this idea is bound to carve up opinions, and is very, very risky. Personally, I do believe that this one day could be the right move to make and could have a positive impact on the sport. Maybe it's a goal to aim towards in the future. A future target that would give people enough time behind the scenes to actually make it work as well. The World Cup at the moment lacks value inherently because the cyclocross landscape is moulded in such a way that one single competition cannot hold too much value. The UCI, Flanders Classics and other varying partners would do well to work towards streamlining the whole season and trying to create a season that is understandable, where the stakes are high from October all the way through to February. I presume these little dreams and ideals make me sound completely mental. I mean, I can definitely see that. But I'd like to know what other people think. Would a potential merger between these competitions have a beneficial impact? And what would you like to see? Would you want a World Cup that is also your World Championship? Or would you like to keep the 2 competitions as separate entities? Please let me know. I'm curious to see what other people make of this, because it's not a conversation I see very often. So with that said, thank you all for watching. See you again next week.